Welcome to the Pumps Market webinar this morning. It's hosted by the McElvain Company, and we're going to be talking about really a sea change in the way we believe that pumps will be purchased in the future. It involves more sophisticated and higher level decision making by the end users and a whole new approach by the suppliers that identifies the purchases of the largest pump suppliers and then provides lowest total cost of ownership validation in all the processes that where pumps are used for all those 7,000 companies. So pump suppliers are now generating revenues of $56 billion. However, the operators are spending $471 billion per year to own, operate, and maintain those pumps. The decisions regarding 84% of these expenditures are being made by just 15,000 companies and less than 30,000 individuals, all of whom can be identified and pursued well in time to provide maximum influence on their choices. 10,000 of the largest pump purchasers will make 52% of the pump decisions. There are 5,000 consultants, plant and system suppliers who will make 32% of the decisions, but of course, that's in conjunction with the pump suppliers as well. There is this sea change that has to be navigated in the market. And so the first step in navigating the sea change in the market is to forecast the purchases which will be made by each of the 15,000 companies. The majority of these purchases decisions would be made by end users. However, plant, system, and other suppliers will also be either direct purchasers or decision makers. For a new plant, a greenfield plant, let's say, or an addition to an existing plant that we would also consider to be greenfield, the end user is likely to provide a bidder list, but the plant, system supplier, or engineering firm will probably make the specific pump choice, often in conjunction with the end user. Most of the replace and upgrade decisions will be made by the end user. The following chart is from a pump supplier perspective. It segments the present purchases. It does not include the associated products sold by non-pump companies such as the VFD motor or distributor suppliers. So in 2019, the new greenfield purchases are going to be about $8 billion, whereas replace and upgrade is $25 billion, repair and service $21, and the guide and control function is a modest $560 million. Of that total, the end users will be making decisions for about $1 billion worth of new greenfield plants, but they'll be making decisions relative to $16.8 billion worth of repair and replace and upgrade, and $17 billion in repair and service, and about $300 million in the guide and control. Now, the plant suppliers and the system suppliers and third-party operators and others will be making the balance of the decisions. So replace and upgrade is the biggest portion of the pie, and repair and service is also big, and new greenfield plants are a smaller portion. Now, most of us are accustomed to reading the financials where the aftermarket is shown to be 40%, and the new equipment market is the larger number. But essentially what we've done with the replace and upgrade and new greenfield is separated the new equipment market into two major segments. And of course, one reason is replace and upgrade is going to be made differently those decisions than the new greenfield plants. And again, the end users, first of all, are involved in most all the decisions, but they directly are involved with most of them and peripherally involved at least with the others. Presently, most of the repair and service decisions are made by the end user. Guide and control revenues generated by pump companies are small. However, IIoT and remote O&M is creating a sea change in the market and has the potential to greatly expand pump company revenue and impact market share. Switching to another subject, 10,000 end users will account for 52% of the purchases, 5,000 plant system and other suppliers for 32%. There are these targeted companies will be spending $47 billion for pumps in 2019. So what we've done is we've identified the targeted companies with the $47 billion in purchases, and that we can then focus on those companies. And again, these targeted companies are companies that will purchase most of the pumps. So the not targeted companies are prolific. There's 30,000 or 40,000 of those non-targeted companies, but their average purchases are only less than $100,000, whereas even the small targets, the purchases for the corporation are more than $1 million a year each, and some of them up to, as we'll see later, $300 and $400 million a year. So the smaller targets will spend $18.5 billion, but the bulk of the purchases will be the $28.5 billion by the large purchasers. That works out in a lot of different ways here when you start looking at it by industry. The chemical industry is fairly dispersed, but the top 1,000 companies will spend $3.8 billion, which is a little less than $2 million each per company. A relatively small number of electronic companies will purchase most of the pumps for that industry, and they'll average purchases of only about 1.4 million. 300 major food companies will each be averaging more than 1.8 million. The mining companies are relatively concentrated as well, and so 200 mining companies are going to average over $8 million each. Oil and gas, 500 companies will average over 15 million each. The pharmaceutical industry is certainly concentrated with 100 companies spending more than, averaging more than 6 million each. Power, equally concentrated with 200 power companies around the world spending nearly an average of 14 million each. Pulp and paper is concentrated, so the several hundred pulp and paper companies are spending 5 million each. Refinery is highly concentrated, and you've got averages of over 9 million each per year for 320. A stone, which would be mainly cement and so forth, and sand and gravel and so forth, is more dispersed, but there are 600 companies that will be spending 3 million each. Wastewater is very diverse, and so you're only capturing a small part of that market, even with the top 1,000 companies, but they will be spending over 2.7 million each, so it's well worth detailing those. And we do have a database that you can get from us, for instance, with 7,000 municipal wastewater plants in the United States, all of which have sizable pump purchases of over 100,000 per year each. And then the municipal wastewater industry is similar. So that brings you to 6,700 companies that will be averaging more than pump purchases of 4 million each. And the point here is a pump supplier can do a lot to get a 20% market share, let's say, for a customer that has a 4 million in purchases per year. So the oil and gas individual targets there are going to be big purchasers. Refinery and power have big numbers as well. So now let's take a look at the heart of what we're talking about here, which is the ability to forecast the purchases for each one of these 15,000 companies. And we can do so in any level of detail. It can be just total pumps, which we're already doing. If you get our pump report, for instance, you do get 100 or 200 companies such as the ones you're looking at here. These purchases of pumps are all contained in an Excel format in the pump report. And in addition to that, we have support data. We have profiles and project data and so forth in our oil, gas, shale, and refining database and markets. It's a service that's updated daily. And it does have, like on ExxonMobil, there's a 100-slide profile that we just posted on all their activities, where all their plants are, and what big projects and activities they had, capital investment they're going to be making over the next few years. So the indirect purchases will be substantial. And so we are also tracking the purchases of companies such as Mitsubishi Hitachi Power Systems, which has just changed its name again to something energy, Doosan, GE, Siemens, B&W, and so forth there. And these are major purchasers of pumps. Somebody like Mitsubishi does have their own pump line, but it's a limited range of pumps. Suez, BEWG, and Veolia are examples of companies who both own water and wastewater plants, operate others, and also design and offer systems using pumps. Some companies are consultants, OEMs, and operators. Jacobs, which recently merged with CH2M, designs and builds plants in various industries. It operates municipal wastewater plants in a number of countries. Bechtel, SNC Lavalin, and Sinopec are also active in all three of those categories. Sinopec is a major purchaser of pumps, but also for its own use, but also for its OEM type activities. And these are identified in various programs on the McElvain website. So how do you make the sale to each of the major purchasers? With increasing use of data analytics and continuous monitoring of pump performance, purchasers will be making very informed decisions. Demonstration of lowest total cost of ownership will become the basis for sales. And I might point out there that this is not a one-time thing, it's an evolving process. So if you have a pump and you have demonstrated lowest total cost of ownership for a particular process, it will be desirable to keep current on the developments in that process, what your competitors are doing, how the process is changing, and how your pumps are improved and can be improved so that you maintain that leadership as the lowest total cost of ownership. So we have extensive services on process systems using pumps, so we have insights on the technology. So this includes all the separation technologies, obviously all of which require pumps. And for example, in power plant FGD, we have very detailed analysis of all the abrasive challenges you have on these big 400,000 GPM recycle requirements that you have with these abrasive slurries. So from an indirect standpoint, pump purchases for scrubber systems are about 800 million a year. And so there's a limited number of companies that can be pursued relative to that particular application from an OEM standpoint. And again, we even have decision systems on, for instance, coal-fired boilers and gas turbines with a pump, subsidiary pump decisions for coal-fired boilers database with some of these challenges and information on all the processes. So just that kind of reviewing the how this all goes together. In something like the food industry, we are able to make projections for ADM and Anheuser-Busch and Cargill and so forth on what their purchases will be for centrifugal, reciprocating, rotary, and diaphragm pumps, and then do it for each of the major areas of the world. And that I think is more beneficial in many respects than just saying how big the market is going to be for reciprocating pumps in the food industry in Asia, or even we do but we do also break down those kind of numbers for every country and every industry. The way we do that is through a lot of our other activities, such as our industrial plants and projects covers profiles and projects in chemical, food, metals, mining, and pulp and paper and stone. It does not include oil and gas. That's a mistake there. The oil and gas is covered in the next paragraph here, which is the oil, gas, shale, and refining markets service. And then for the power industry, we have profiles and project data, weekly alerts, and so forth. For coal-fired power plants in utility tracking, for gas turbine and reciprocating engines in a separate program. And we have water and wastewater and a couple different programs, and we're integrating that into worldwide activities presently. So the combination of the services on individual purchasers and the pump report lays the foundation for forecasting specific purchases for the 6,600 large targets. So here are some examples. For instance, here just the wastewater pump purchases for BASF plants in the US, and of course they have them all over the world, but this is just the wastewater pumps that they have, and it's based on their wastewater discharges. So you can see that they have 24 MGD, which is the wastewater really of a fairly large city in their Wyandotte plant. And so they're going to have a big expenditure for pumps a year, over $1 million a year. So that's one way that we are pursuing the analysis. And here we have chlorine producers, and we've been doing a lot of special studies on mag drive and mechanical seal line pumps and exotic alloys for the various different industries, and this happens to be the chlorine industry. And what we did here is to figure out what the pump purchases were for the actual chlorine production. But some of these companies also then have processes where they use their own chlorine that they're making in downstream processes, and so that needs to be taken into account as well. So I mentioned that we are doing these detailed studies for lined and exotic materials pumps, which does include the mag drive, mechanical seal type centrifugal pumps. And for instance, the pharmaceutical industry spends only $30 million a year for these very special pumps, much smaller than the chemical industry for those pumps. But we can take that level of detail. We've also been doing some studies on gear pumps, and so we can break all that down, even for somebody like Pfizer, down to how much they're going to be spending for 3-screw type pumps in the Americas, EMEA, and Asia. So these, again, we're able to benefit from the technical information and a lot of the specific market research that we're doing. The analysis also takes into account how much is going to be spent for replacement pumps and repairs, and you get a very large owner operator such as BEWG out of China that operates 400 wastewater plants, not only in China, but they also have a few in Singapore, Portugal, and other countries. And they're going to spend just under $20 million for pumps this year. But the bigger portion of that will be replacement pumps. And China, for instance, has a big energy efficiency program underway right now. And some of the components that, such as the compressors that BEWG is replacing, are relatively new compressors, but they're oversized and they're replacing with smaller compressors to take advantage of that energy efficiency. And I might also point out that we have electricity costs for every country of the world. And so when you start doing these lowest total cost of ownership validation, for the average country in the world, the benefit of lower energy consumption is going to be twice to 3 times what it is here in the US. Here's the analysis for a large California wastewater treatment plant pump purchases for this current year. And you can see that there's some pretty sizable plants that have several hundred million MGD for a particular operation. They might have 2 or 3 plants within LA County, but they are all, the decisions all made by the LA County group. And so you've got as much as $35 million in decisions being made by some of these operators. So expanding the revenue base with total solutions is a big opportunity here. And so pump manufacturers have the opportunity to work with the end users as well as plant and system suppliers to provide edge computer technology packages built around continual innovations in pump design and application. And I think this is the key, which is with all this data analytics, there's going to be a big opportunity for innovation, and those suppliers that keep providing a lower total cost of ownership through innovation are going to be even more successful, because there now is a vehicle for them to prove that this is happening. Heretofore, it was all speculation and very difficult probing necessary to try to determine what the lowest total cost of ownership would be. But in the future, with another concept that we won't get into today, but I think which we think is very important, is the industrial internet of wisdom, and pulling all this information together that is out there relative to all these studies that are being made, let's say by municipal wastewater architect engineers for analyzing pump purchases at a particular plant. When all that data can be pulled together, you have a tremendous knowledge base to move forward with even additional analytics beyond what is given in your software programs. Pump companies can take the advantage of all this, use all this knowledge, and come up with their edge computer type programs. They can also supply the variable speed drives as well as the measurement and control equipment, and put this together into packages, which they're already doing. There are a number of pump suppliers that are doing this, and we have a whole IIoT webinar on pumps that's a part of our IIoT service. But the YouTube version of that is available free of charge. And the $147 billion now spent on pump maintenance, some of that can be captured in new expenditures by the innovative pump companies. So the pump suppliers can provide guide and control packages to reduce the $235 billion spent on pump energy. And studies do show that 30% energy saving is already achievable. Energy costs in the US are less than 50% of the costs in Europe and many Asian countries. So this saving is even more significant outside the United States. Pump companies with knowledge of the processes, the customers, site-specific factors, and with the edge software packages to integrate with end-user cloud systems, have the opportunity to expand revenue and, more importantly, raise EBITDA at the same time. And I think that raising EBITDA is a key portion of it. So we have information on the business programs. We have information on the industrial IIoT and remote O&M, and of course the pump reports. And a little additional information here is analysis of what the life cycle costs are. And you can see that energy and maintenance are very, very substantial costs compared to the initial expenditures for the pumps. And again, this is shown graphically here. And so the energy being 50% of the total, and the pump company revenue is only 12%. So there's a huge opportunity for the pump companies to get bigger chunks of the rest of these expenditures. And lastly, what are the steps based on the forecast for each plant? How do you integrate all that? First of all, you segment your products into two categories. One is high performance and general performance. Then you determine product revenue for each potential purchaser at each plant. You can post those forecasts into the CRM system. We can deliver them for these many thousands of companies in an Excel spreadsheet that you can download and integrate. Then you have to prioritize these customers based on the serviceable obtainable market and the product categories. So for each product, you have a serviceable obtainable market. And where the product is in the general performance category, you would use the forecast only as an evaluation tool on a retrospective basis and to replace sales leads on a proactive basis. However, where the SOM is below a revenue size warranting direct sales, the existing sales approach can be used. You can obviously be going through your reps, and you don't have to have a new direct sales program. However, for high performance products and for prospects with sizable SOM, the revenue potential, it's necessary or desirable to initiate a 5-step program, which we have explained in detail on our website. And then lastly, these forecasts need to be revised continually, but also there needs to be a continuing evaluation of the processes and the products by the pump suppliers, with the idea in mind that innovation is going to be accelerating, and that more of the pump supplier investment is going to be on R&D than it is on expanding its sales force. And with that, I think that ends the program this morning. If there are questions from the floor, I'd be happy to entertain them. If not, I'd like to thank you for joining us this morning, and I'd be happy to address any questions you may have, as would others on our staff. So with that, I think I'm going to sign off. So this is Bob McIlvaine signing off for today.